Oh my gosh. I'm getting married in 8 days. I'm walking down the aisle and marrying the love of my life. Between slight panic attacks and just joy beyond belief, I'm somewhere right there in the middle. One thing that always calms my nerves is sewing. So today we're gonna make a little lacy robe that I can wear the morning of my wedding while I get ready. I don't have a pattern for this, so I'm just gonna kind of wing it using a robe that I already own. Before we begin, I have to mention this little ring that I'm wearing. I was gifted the Ultra Human Ring Air by Ultra Human, and I'm just gonna tell you about it real quick because it is truly changing my life and I'm not being dramatic. So this ring connects to a little app on my phone. One of my favorite features is it gives a sleep index. So basically it gives a little sleep score, and every morning when I wake up, I'm so excited. This is the first thing I check. I can click into my sleep index and see how much I was awake, how much REM sleep I got, how much light sleep I got, and deep sleep. Another one of my favorite things is that it tracks your body temperature. I'm always trying to understand my cycle better. This constantly tracks my body temperature, and it will let me know when my temperature is elevated, and during certain parts of your cycle, your temperature actually elevates. It also tracks movement, how many steps I get in a day. It tracks my stress rhythm. This will tell me when I'm stimulated, when I'm stressed, when I'm relaxed. All of this technology is in this tiny little ring. The process is super easy. They first send a little ring sizing kit so you can find which ring size fits you best. I like to wear mine on my index finger. And Ultra Human was kind enough to give a discount, so you can use SHAW10 at checkout for 10% off your order, or click the link in my description box. Okay, with that said, let's get started. So I'm using this beautiful white stretch lace, and I went into my bathroom and found this beautiful little robe that I'm going to use as a template. So before I start, I always like to check the fit. So I'm first making sure I like where the little neckline is. This one fits me pretty high up on the neck, so I'm taking a mental note of that. I'm also checking how wide the robe is. I kind of want to wear mine slightly open, so I think this is going to be the perfect size. Obviously, I'm going to add some length onto the bottom. I also know I want to do some big, long bell sleeves on my robe, so I'm measuring from this hem to however long I want the sleeves to be, and I'm taking a little mental note. Grab your pattern paper. We're going to start drafting a little pattern. I'm going to start with the front side of the robe. I'm laying this down nice and flat, and I'm going to take a little washable marker and start tracing all around the perimeter of the robe. I'm also adding 24 inches on because I want this to be super long, and I'm going to use a ruler and just straighten my lines all around. You always want to make sure you're getting nice 90-degree angles when you're pattern drafting. So using a ruler is crucial. Next, I'm laying it down and I'm checking the fit, especially around that armhole. I made a few adjustments. You just want to trace exactly where the seam lines are. Once you're happy with that, you can go ahead and add seam allowance. So I'm adding 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all around. That's because I'm using 1/4 of an inch bias tape at the very end to finish all of my raw edges. Okay, moving on to the back of the robe. I'm folding this in half and I'm going to start tracing it all around. And then I'm laying the front pattern piece down. You always want to make sure the front and the back pieces match up at that shoulder seam. So I'm making any adjustments I need there. They also need to match up along the side seams because those will be connected later. And this is when I realized that the front was oddly a lot bigger than the back, which was weird. That confused me. But I measured, and this robe also proved to be true, that the back was smaller than the front. So I'm tracing that side seam so the back and the front match up perfectly at the side seam. And please ignore these little lines right here. Those were mistakes. And once that's done, I'm going to add my 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all around. And I'm making a little note here to cut this on the fold. The back is going to be cut on the fold so it's nice and symmetrical. Okay, moving on to the sleeve, I'm going to trace the outline of my robe. Now I'm adding about 4 inches onto the hem. I want to give these sleeves a nice bell shape. I'm just kind of winging this. I'm freehanding this. I'm triple checking my measurements. And then I made the sleeve even more wide. And you always want to cross-check your measurements. So I'm laying down my pattern piece and I'm making sure the armhole is all matched up because those will be connected later on. That's me very surprised. They were absolutely perfect and I was shook. Let's start cutting. I'm starting with the back pattern piece. I have my fabric folded in half. I'm going to cut my pattern piece out. I also cut 2 front pieces out and 2 sleeves. And last, I'm cutting a really long waist tie. I think this was like 65 inches long and 5 inches wide. Let's start connecting our pattern pieces. So I'm laying the back piece down. This is me a little bit worried about the shape of that armhole and that neckline, but we're gonna persevere for now. I'm gonna lay my front robe piece right sides together and my other front robe piece right sides together, and I'm pinning them along the shoulder seams. I'll go ahead and sew along those pinned edges, and I'm using a zigzag stitch for most of this robe because this is a stretch fabric. Now, this is a stretch fabric, so it really won't fray that much, but I am not taking any precautions, so I'm going to go ahead and serge all of my raw edges after every seam. Okay, next I'm checking the fit. The only thing I'm concerned about is how big this armhole is. So I'm thinking about maybe sewing up the side seam a little more, which will make the armhole a little smaller. Have I mentioned that my pattern making skills are very janky? This is about to be a bumpy ride, but we're gonna get there. I'm also gonna take a little bit of fabric in here at the shoulder seam. I think that's gonna make the armhole a little bit smaller. So again, taking a mental note. Also, I noticed that this went way too far down my shoulder. It's like an extreme drop shoulder, which I don't really want. So again, taking a mental note. So let's go ahead and cut. I'm just kind of going with my heart here. I'm first cutting that shoulder seam to make it not as drop shoulder-ish. I'll cut that same piece off the other side because it needs to be symmetrical. Now I'm shaving off a little on the side seam, which will make that armhole smaller. So I made whatever adjustments I needed to make that armhole smaller, and now it's time to add the sleeve. So I'm gonna fold my sleeve in half and find the middle point, and then I'll match that middle point on the sleeve up with the middle point of the shoulder seam, and I'll start pinning that sleeve all around. I'll do the same exact thing for the other sleeve. Again, sewing this with a zigzag stitch and then finishing the raw edges with a serger. I had to make the sleeve a little bit smaller in order to fit my new smaller armhole. Now I'm going to close up the side seams and the sleeve all with one seam. So I'm pinning them right sides together. This is going to make a little more sense, just keep watching. So I'm pinning all down the side seam and then I'm pinning down the sleeve. Before I sew this, I'm trying it on again because I need to make sure I don't need to make any other adjustments. This was a process of trying on, shaving off, trying on, shaving off, and then I sewed those pinned edges. Now for my waist tie, I'm going to fold this hot dog style right sides together and pin it all the way down. And then I'll go ahead and sew that pinned edge. And I left a little opening in this so that I could flip it right side out, just like you're making a little sausage. Flip it right side out, iron it nice and flat. And then I took that back to my sewing machine and just closed up that little tiny opening in the waist tie. Okay, I was conflicted here because I really liked the raw edge hem, but it still looked a little unfinished right here at the neckline. So I took my trusty bias tape. This is just satin bias tape that I found on Amazon. This is me perplexed at why I couldn't find the end of the bias tape. Very strange. So starting with my sleeve, I'm opening the bias tape up and I'm pinning it to the right side of my sleeve. I'll take it to my sewing machine and sew the bias tape down right in the middle of the bias tape. And when I get to the end, I'm just overlapping the edges by like an inch. And now this is crucial with bias tape. You're gonna need to gently trim the seam allowance in half. You don't want to accidentally cut the garment while you're doing this, but it's very important because it removes a lot of that bulk. And the last step for the bias tape, I'm just folding it over to the inside of the garment and I'll sew it down. So what this does is it gives you a nice clean edge on the inside of the garment as well as the outside. And I'm sewing this with a straight stitch all around. And that's it. This robe was surprisingly so easy to make. This is truly one of my favorite things I've ever made. I layered it over this little satin slip dress that I found on Amazon. It's linked in my Amazon storefront in my bio. I also found these little shoes also on Amazon. I just feel like a princess. I know I'm gonna be so nervous leading up to the wedding, worried about if all the details are gonna come together. So wearing this dress while I'm getting ready, I know is just gonna make me feel so calm and sweet, and I cannot wait to get some iconic photos in this robe. So thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna be a married woman next time we speak. I'm so excited. I cannot wait, and I will see you soon.